Total War Warhammer is all about taking the right fight at the right time, targeting your opponent's units with the most efficient damage. However, this can be quite complicated to pick up with the sheer diversity of units over different rosters in the game. So in this quick guide video, we'll be covering some key aspects of targeting priority, helping you making the most out of your units. When picking your target, the first thing to think about is always how important is the unit to your opponent's army. Most armies rely on a few units to win the game, so we call those the win condition. They're usually the most important unit to the army, and that's why we want to get rid of them as soon as possible by targeting them first. For the Bretonnians here, it is definitely the Royal Pegasus Knight, the 2 Grail Cavalry, and also King Luan Leonke himself. So while the Peasant Bowmen, the Peasant Infantry can be annoying, my focus will not be on them. Instead, I'll be throwing everything onto shutting down these expensive Bretonnian elites. While my front line is definitely pushing, you can see a lot of my monsters are not committing as I'm reserving them to deal with the Grail Cavalry. Marauder horses are also held back to skirmish against the Royal Pegasus Knights, and once the Grail Knights charge in, I'll be responding with many of the monsters to focus on them. My Familiars and Skinwolves are putting all their effort to slaughter the Grail Knights. Getting Fight or Die buffed up on them, Frog himself fighting in the mix as well, just trying to burst down these Grail Knights as soon as possible, even throwing down a final transmutation upgraded version. I'm investing a majority of my resources to deal with my opponent's cavalry because I know that once I get rid of them, the peasants are free for my taking. Because of how expensive and powerful these Grail Cavalry are, even getting rid of only one of them would be giving me a great advantage. Usually the most important units takes the form of characters or expensive elite units. However, sometimes things are not so straightforward. Despite the most expensive units being the Empire Knights and the War Wagons with mortars, the Huntsmen are actually more important than them because this entire Empire build is built around keeping the Huntsmen alive to dish out the damage, while Balthasar Gout providing that Plague of Rust to debuff my heavy cavalry's armor, and then the Huntsmen Anti-Large can obliterate them from afar. And so my failure to actually shut down all these Huntsmen and my opponent's effort to keep them alive means that my Bretonnian rush will be largely failing. The importance of a unit can vary between matchups, especially when it comes to cost-efficient missile units. That's why it is important to analyze your opponent's army in every battle to pick out the most important units to target first. Sometimes being important and expensive doesn't mean that they are the priority target. Instead, we have some other criteria that sometimes override the unit importance. Take this battle for example. Despite the extremely scary and powerful Shredder of Lustria, I am not actually focusing all my firepower onto the dinosaur. Instead, I'm actually dividing some of these Grand Cannons to shoot at the Salamander hunting packs because they impose a more immediate threat. As you can see here, due to their ranged missiles, the Salamander hunting packs are already damaging my Grand Cannon crews. So I'll be shooting them and also throw in a Jade Lancet just to drive them away, silencing the Lizardman missiles and securing my artillery backline. In contrast, the Shredder of Lustria, despite looking very intimidating, is actually not as urgent of a danger to my army. After driving away the Salamanders and containing the Shredder with my own cavalry, the Grand Cannons can once again freely shoot at the Shredder. In my opinion, an urgent threat should always have the targeting priority over an important unit. That's because you also have your own win condition that you have to protect and make sure they function properly. For example, in this battle where the Lead Belchers are one of my win conditions, I'm actually using them to shoot at the Black Ark Corsairs instead of the more expensive Scourge Runners and Cold One Knights. Sure, the Dark Elf Mobility and the Supreme Sorceress on a Dragon are more expensive, but my flanks are now quite secure while my front lines are getting crumped by the Dark Elf Infantry. Once they breach my front line, they can actually do some nice damage on my Lead Belchers. So to make sure my Lead Belchers do not get disrupted by my opponent's infantry push, I'll have to shoot them down first. With the focus fire on the Black Ark Corsairs and Bleak Swords, I was able to repel their attack, and then with the secured Lead Belchers, I can focus down my opponent's win condition, the Supreme Sorceress and the Cold One Knights. Basically, you want to protect your key units, making sure that urgent threats don't get to them. Otherwise, you might just lose the units that can win you the game, and even if you want to target something, you wouldn't have the right tools to do so. Now for the third factor to consider when choosing your targets, the efficiency of damage. Sometimes even if you're looking at an urgent threat or a very important unit, you still want to ignore it because you know that you can't really do any efficient damage. For example, Balthasar Gout here on horseback. His hitbox is relatively small, so I can't really hit him with the missiles. Even if I shoot them with the skirmishers, most of the shots will miss. At the same time, I don't have any units that can reliably catch Balthasar Gout in melee combat. He is on horseback, so he do have more speed than my Bacon cavalry with 82 speed versus the Boar Boys 70. Perhaps I can catch him a couple times using Effigy of the Git on Wurzag, but with all the supporting state troops around the battlefield, it is definitely not a guarantee snipe. And if I waste my time and effort just trying to snipe out the Lord, that means my opponent's army have all the time they need to do whatever they want. That could not happen, so instead of dealing with Balthasar Gout, I chose to just finish off his army, which will lead to army losses routing the Empire Lord himself. In land battles, the resources available are very limited, so you gotta make sure you're using them at the right place, doing maximum damage to your opponent. If you don't have any efficient ways to do damage, then perhaps the best way is just to ignore that threat. This is often a solution to a lot of tankier lords. Take Tyrion here for example. He is extremely tanky with his high melee defense, armor, and missile resistance, and on top of that he has more defensive abilities that boost his protection, especially with Heart of Avalon that can give him massive burst heals. And on my end, all I have are Lead Belcher, Stonehorn Hunter, and a bunch of Nobblers, plus some Crushers that are not great weapons. Now perhaps I could try spending all my resources onto killing Tyrion, but those same resources could have been better used on killing off my opponent's infantry support, especially the Sisters of Avalon. My Stonehorns and Lead Belchers are way more effective in killing off infantry units, and trying to use them on a single entity horse model would be a waste of their damage potential. The same can be applied to other tanky units like Vlad von Kostine, Prince Sigvald the Magnificent, and of course Marlis Darkblade. They might have the potential to carry the game, but you just have to ignore them, eliminate all their support, and focus them down in the end. One thing worth noting is that damage efficiency is a finicky thing to understand. There are so many different units in Total War Warhammer and all of them interact differently with each other. The Hellblaster volley guns here, usually known as the multi-shot anti-infantry artillery, actually do really well against monster, and then there are the Huntsmen at the back despite their lack of armor piercing. When synergized with Plague of Rust and the Accusation from the Empire characters, they will absolutely shred even the toughest Stone Horn. There are so many factors in play here, including magic, abilities, bugs that interfere unit interactions, and sometimes game mechanics. All of these can affect the damage efficiency of a unit against their enemies, so players would need to know their own army and their opponent's army well to understand which unit is best against which unit. So for a quick recap, when you're choosing your target priority, usually go for the most important unit first. But if an urgent danger is approaching, threatening to disrupt your army, deal with that first so that your army can continue to function normally. And finally, make sure your units are doing efficient damage. Otherwise, you would be wasting resources that could have been invested elsewhere. That's all for today's video. I hope you find this useful, and if you want to see more Total War Warhammer content, be sure to subscribe to my channel and receive notifications with new videos. That's all for today, and thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Tactical Lich, signing out.